Hey there. I want to start by saying that if you're watching this, it means you've already done something incredibly brave. You've chosen to look at your environment not just as a place you live, but as a part of your recovery team. This week, we're exploring something that doesn't get talked about enough in recovery: how the spaces around us either help or hinder our healing. And no, we're not here to tell you to declutter your whole house or to become a Pinterest perfect person. What we are here to do is to talk about real, doable systems that make your daily life just a little easier, a little safer, a little more aligned with what you want most. Because when your environment supports you, everything else starts to feel more possible. So let's start with something most people don't realize. Your brain is responding to your environment all day long, whether you notice it or not. Let's take a look at how visual cues shape our behavior and how we can use that to support recovery. Now, we've all heard that environment matters in recovery, but what isn't often said is this: it's not enough to just remove the triggers. You can't just clear out the pantry and expect everything to settle down, because recovery doesn't thrive in a space that's just neutral. It thrives in a space that actively supports you. That's what we're talking about this week: how to set up protective systems in your environment. Think of these like guardrails for your nervous system. They help reduce decision fatigue, support your parts that get overwhelmed, and give you visible cues of safety and intention throughout your day. This is especially important because we live in a world where processed foods are aggressively marketed and completely normalized. You can't walk through a store or scroll your phone without being hit with craving triggers. That's not a flaw in your willpower. That's by devious design. So instead of trying to push through all that chaos alone, we're going to build some structure around you. We're focusing on three powerful tools this week: labels, or visual cues that help reinforce your identity, your intention, and speak with compassion to the parts inside of you; reminders, simple structures to support memory, self leadership, and habit formation when your brain gets tired or overwhelmed; and meal zones, physical boundaries that reduce chaos, lower stress, and create calm by sending clear signals to your nervous system. Each of these tools is designed to support recovery by creating what we call the architecture of safety. They don't control you, they support you. They help you show up for yourself, especially in the moments when it's hard. So let's get into how they work and how to start using them in your everyday life. All right, let's start by talking about something that influences your behavior way more than you might realize: visual cues. Our brains are constantly scanning the environment for information, interpreting colors and objects and smells and sounds and patterns. And here's the thing: none of it is neutral. Everything we see or sense has the potential to be a cue. And in recovery, those cues can either pull us toward healing or pull us back into old patterns. Neuroscientists have a name for this. It's called cue reactivity. And it means that the brain reacts automatically to certain signals in the environment, especially if those signals were once associated with relief, reward, or escape. For example, maybe there's a certain drawer in your kitchen that used to be your go-to during late night cravings. Or maybe there's a time of day, like right after work, when your brain just lights up, expecting something to take the edge off. That's not a character flaw. That's your brain doing exactly what it was trained to do. Here's what happens on a neurological level. The amygdala, your brain's emotional memory center, kicks in saying, hey, we've been here before. This is the part where we get relief. And then the hippocampus remembers the context, the time, the place, the smell, the lighting. And the nucleus accumbens, which is responsible for reward anticipation, starts generating that intense drive to act right now. These systems were designed to help us survive. But in today's world, especially with ultra-processed foods that were engineered to hijack these circuits, they often get exploited. So what can we do? We create protective systems. These are intentional tools that act as counterweights to all those hijacking cues. And they work by doing three really important things. Number one, redirect attention. When you place something like a label or a reminder in a high-risk location, like on a pantry door, on your phone, or on the fridge, you disrupt the automatic loop. Instead of going straight from cue to craving to behavior, your attention is briefly hijacked in a good way. It gives your brain a chance to pause. That pause creates space for a different choice. Number two, anchoring identity. Visual cues that reflect your values, your recovery goals, your inner strengths, actually help activate the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision-making, long-term thinking, and self-regulation. It's like reminding your brain, hey, we don't do that anymore. We're becoming someone new. And the brain starts to believe it. The more you engage this part of your brain, the stronger it gets. And number three, creating predictability. When your environment is predictable, it signals safety to your nervous system. That's especially important for parts of us, like our firefighters, that tend to panic when things feel chaotic. Creating clear zones and routines lowers stress and helps your internal system feel grounded and held. All of this isn't just theory. It's backed by research. In his book, The Brain That Changes Itself, Dr. Norman Doidge explains how neuroplasticity allows our brains to build entirely new patterns over time. When we repeat new cues in new environments, we can actually override older, conditioned pathways. And research by Gerhardt using fMRI scans shows that ultra-processed food cues light up the brain in the same areas activated by addictive drugs. So yes, those cravings you're experiencing, they're real. And they're driven by a very specific and powerful brain pattern. So what we're doing here is this. We're not trying to control ourselves through force. We're trying to gently reshape the environment so it works with our brains, not against them. This is how we start to feel more grounded. This is how we help the overwhelmed parts inside us settle down. And this is how we begin to feel like we're actually supported in our recovery. Not just surviving, but designing a space where healing is possible. Now that we've talked about the science behind visual cues, let's make it practical. One of the simplest, most powerful ways to change how your brain responds to your environment is by using labels. And I don't just mean sticky notes. I mean real messages to your brain and to your parts. Now, I know it might sound a little basic. A sticky note? Really? But stay with me. In recovery, a label isn't just a sticky note. It's a neurointerrupter. It's a values-based cue. It's even a way of communicating directly with the parts inside you that are scared, activated, or just trying to get through the day. So let's unpack why this works. Cravings don't start when you notice them. They often begin long before, in milliseconds. Your brain catches a glimpse of something, a drawer, a cupboard, a time of day, and immediately it lights up. The hippocampus kicks in with context memory. This is where we used to get relief. And then the amygdala adds an emotional charge. We need this now. And finally, the nucleus accumbens says, yes, reward is coming. And by the time you feel the craving, your brain is already sprinting. A label placed before the sprint begins acts like a speed bump. The visual input goes straight to the occipital lobe and then gets routed to your prefrontal cortex, the part that can say, wait, let's think this through. But here's the key. It only works if the label connects with something that matters to you. Here's an example. Imagine seeing a drawer that used to be your go-to during binges. And right there is a note that says, we're building peace, not panic. That's not just a reminder. That's a narrative shift. Instead of the old story, this is where I get relief, you've inserted a new story. This is where I choose calm. You've disrupted the loop. That's neuroscience. Cravings can feel like they erase everything you care about. In that moment, the voice of a protector part might drown out your recovery goals, your self-trust, even your identity. But a well-placed label can bring it all back. It reconnects you to your why. Neuroscience supports this too. The medial prefrontal cortex, which lights up when we reflect on our personal identity and long-term goals, responds strongly to value-based language. Lieberman showed that people who were reminded of their values had better self-regulation under stress. So yes, those little phrases on your mirror or your fridge, they aren't cheesy. They're brain tools. Here are some example labels. Freedom matters more than fast relief. This choice makes space for joy later. Remember who you're becoming. These aren't commands. They're connections to the self, to hope, to healing. Now here's where it gets really beautiful. Labels can speak directly to the parts inside of you. You might have a protector part who's bracing for distress. You might have a manager trying to keep everything in control, or a deeply impacted part carrying shame and sadness. Imagine what it would feel like for a firefighter to read, you don't have to fix this with food. Or for a manager to see, you're not alone in this anymore. Or for a deeply impacted part to come across, your pain is real and we're listening now. These are external messages, but they create internal resonance. And sometimes when everything feels noisy inside, the simplest phrase on a label can bring calm. This is what we call externalized self-talk. It bypasses inner chaos. It gives language to your system when you can't find the words yourself. And it models secure attachment. It says to every part, I see you, I'm with you, you matter. Let's ground this even more in brain science. Visual processing is rapid and sticky. The brain processes visuals 60,000 times faster than text. That means one small phrase placed in the right location can alter your next behavior. Language shapes perception. Research from Boroditsky shows that the words we use actually change how we experience reality. A label isn't just a statement, it's a lens. It helps your brain interpret the moment in a new way. State dependent learning. If you encode a skill or tool in the same setting where you'll need it, you're more likely to remember it later. That's why reading a label in a high risk environment increases the odds that your system will actually use what the label says during a craving. Here are some practical ideas for where to use labels in your space. Remember, these are not rules, they're invitations. Inside drawers or cabinets where old patterns used to play out. On your fridge, pantry, or microwave. On your laptop or workspace, especially if stress eating is a pattern. As the lock screen on your phone. In your car. On meal prep containers or your daily planner. On your bathroom mirror or near your journal. You can even change them weekly. The point is to make your internal transformation visible in your environment. So what happens when the day gets busy, the stress rolls in, and your intentions start to slip away? That's where reminders come in. They help you to carry your recovery story with you, even when things get hard. Where labels stay in place, like quiet sentinels anchoring your space, reminders are mobile. They travel with you, weaving recovery into your day. These aren't just productivity hacks. In recovery, reminders are like scaffolding for your brain. They hold your intentions when the world or your internal system feels loud, fast, or disoriented. Let's talk about why we forget things we want to remember. Stress, and especially long-term exposure to stress, like in addiction, directly affects the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles working memory, planning, and impulse control. A 2008 study in Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews showed that chronic stress literally changes this part of the brain. It weakens our ability to hold onto our goals, especially when we're under pressure. So here's what that means in recovery. Even if you know what to do, even if you want to make the right choice, in the moment of craving, your brain may simply forget. And that's not a failure of willpower. That's a survival system doing what it was trained to do. That's why reminders aren't just helpful, they're essential. They extend the reach of your prefrontal cortex into your environment. They remember for you until you can remember again on your own. When we repeat a new behavior in response to a cue, the brain starts building a new circuit. That's neuroplasticity. It's how habits form. A reminder, whether it's an alarm on your phone or a grounding object in your pocket, becomes the new cue in your loop. Every time you respond to it with a recovery-aligned behavior, you reinforce a new neural pathway. You strengthen the connection between cue and calm. You start to override the old pattern that led from cue to chaos. You retrain your identity as someone who responds, not just reacts. This isn't just theory. Research in behavioral psychology confirms that changing the cues that surround a habit is far more effective than just trying to use willpower. Let's look at 3 types of reminders and how they can help. Number 1, digital reminders. You can use phone alarms labeled with gentle messages like pause, breathe, what do you need? Calendar events for things that matter like meal prep, group calls, your bedtime. App pop-ups like from Google Keep or Apple Notes, that nudge you toward care. These work best when timed to high-risk moments, like mid-afternoon, before dinner, or right before bed, when cravings tend to spike. Think of them as interrupts for autopilot. Number 2, sensory or tactile reminders. These bypass language entirely. You might wear a ring you twist or touch when a craving hits, a bracelet that reminds you of your healing path, a grounding stone or object in your pocket that brings you back to the present. These cues speak directly to the body's sense of safety. They help soothe reactive parts without needing you to talk yourself through it. They're fast, embodied, and deeply personal. Number 3, environmental reminders. These are stationary but powerful. Sticky notes on your fridge or mirror, visual checklist in your kitchen or journal, a whiteboard with your rhythm for the week. They work by creating predictability and cue clarity. They eliminate decision fatigue and reduce the need for mental gymnastics. You walk into the room and your brain says, "Oh yeah, I know what we're doing here." So let's come back to the science. Repetition builds automation. As Norman Doidge explained in The Brain That Changes Itself, the more often you activate a neural pathway, the stronger it becomes. Reminders are how you create that repetition without relying on willpower. Contextual cues reduce decision fatigue. According to Baumeister's research, the more decisions we make in a day, the more depleted our self-control becomes. A reminder eliminates the mental debate. It shows you the choice without needing an argument. Reminders activate long-term memory. Over time, your hippocampus starts to associate these reminders with integrity, relief, and self-energy. That's a new memory loop forming, and it's anchored in healing. Now, not every part is going to love reminders. You might hear voices inside like, "This is embarrassing. We are not children. This is too much." These are often manager parts. They're trying to protect your image, your efficiency, or your sense of competence. And that's okay. Here's something you can say to those parts. "I hear that this feels like too much. I'm not trying to shame us. I just want to build scaffolding so we don't fall when things get hard." Reminders aren't for people who are weak. They're for people who are healing. And in parts work, we don't force reminders. We invite them in as support structures. You might even say to your system, "I'll remember for us until we're strong enough to remember on our own." That's how we build trust internally and externally. Let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about cues and reminders that move with you, but now we're going to talk about the power of place. Specifically, how a simple, consistent meal zone can reduce chaos and help your system feel safe, grounded, and clear. If you've ever eaten on the couch, in the car, at your desk, while standing at the fridge, or even while scrolling on your phone, you're not alone. For many of us, food became a background activity, something we use to cope, escape, or survive. But when eating happens everywhere, it starts to feel like safety happens nowhere. That's why this week we're introducing the concept of a meal zone. A simple, defined space where food preparation or eating happens intentionally. The human brain loves predictability. It's how we stay calm. And it turns out that creating predictable, designated spaces for activities like eating actually lowers stress and reduces cravings. Here's why. When the brain knows what to expect, the amygdala, which scans for danger, can relax. The hypothalamus, which regulates survival needs like hunger, doesn't have to stay hypervigilant. And the prefrontal cortex, your wise long-term planner, has a better chance of staying online. In contrast, when we eat in every room, every car ride, or every stressful moment, the brain forms overlapping associations. This place equals time to eat. So just walking into your living room can trigger a craving. Not because you're hungry, but because your brain learned to expect reward in that space. This is called cue-induced craving. It's not a lack of discipline. It's a well-learned neurological loop, and we can change it. In habit change studies, the most effective behavior shifts happened when new habits were tied to specific context. This is called contextual cueing, and it's exactly what a meal zone provides. By assigning one space for meals, you teach your brain, this is where nourishment happens. Everything else can wait. Meal zones help recovery in at least 4 big ways. Number 1, lowering decision fatigue. When you know where you'll eat, that's one less decision your system has to make. That frees up energy for the harder work, like staying present with your parts or noticing a craving before it takes over. Number 2, reducing cue overload. Eating in one space means other areas, like your couch, your bed, your car, are no longer paired with eating. That clears up confusion in your brain. It also means those spaces can become safe zones for rest, work, or connection, not food cues. Number 3, signaling transitions. Sitting down in a meal zone becomes a ritual. It tells your body, it's time to slow down. We're about to nourish. That rhythm helps firefighter parts feel soothed without chaos. Number 4, supporting mindful presence. In a meal zone, multitasking goes down and mindfulness goes up. You're more likely to notice your food, your breath, your emotions, and your parts. That's where healing happens, not just in what you eat, but in how you relate to it. This doesn't have to be Pinterest worthy or Instagram perfect. Here's what matters most: consistency. Here are some ideas. Pick a table, countertop, or tray that you can dedicate to eating. Keep the space clear of distractions. No phones, laptops, or paperwork. Add sensory cues, maybe a placemat, a candle, a napkin you love, or your favorite cup. Anchor a grounding ritual to the space, a pause, a breath, a quick check-in with your parts before you eat. This routine, repeated over time, becomes a neural anchor, a signal of calm and structure in a world that was once chaotic. Of course, not all your parts will love this idea. Your firefighter parts might say, I need to eat on the couch. That's how we decompress. I don't want this to feel like a diet. Meal zones sound controlling. If we change everything, we'll fail. These parts aren't being difficult. They're trying to help. Eating in front of the TV or in the car might have been how they kept you safe. It was their way of giving you relief or hiding you from judgment. That's valid. So instead of pushing those parts away, try meeting them with compassion. You could say, I know you've been using this space to help me feel calm. Thank you. I wonder if we could try something new, a space where all of us can feel safe without needing to escape. You're not removing comfort. You're redefining it. And here's where our favorite rhythm comes in: totters. Let's say you're trying a meal zone. You don't need to get it perfect. Just follow the recovery rhythm. Trying a setup that feels realistic. Observing how your system responds, especially your parts. Talking about it in your journal or with your advocate. Tweaking it to make it more comfortable, supportive, or soothing. And enjoy repeating slowly until you find what works for you without pressure or perfection. Every time you come back to that meal zone, you're sending a message to your brain and your inner system. We've got this. We're building rhythm, not rules. Let's take a breath here. We've covered a lot this week, from how our brains respond to visual cues, to setting up meal zones that invite calm, to the power of a label or a reminder that speaks straight to the heart of a craving. So how do we integrate all of this? One of the most powerful ways is through reflection. Reflection slows the system down. It lets yourself, that calm, curious, compassionate core, sit down with your parts and say, okay, what did we learn this week? What felt good? What didn't? So here are a few journaling prompts that can help you check in with your internal world. What systems in my environment feel supportive? Think about your home, your car, your workspace. Are there any spaces that already feel like allies in your recovery? And on the flip side, are there spaces that still feel chaotic or triggering? What kind of reminders or labels speak directly to the needs of my parts? If you were to walk through your day and pass by a note or message that made you feel understood, what would it say? Which part would it be speaking to? Is there a protector part resisting change this week? What is it afraid of? Sometimes the resistance is subtle, like forgetting, procrastinating, or feeling annoyed. Try to get curious about what that resistance is trying to protect you from. What story is it telling? If I could offer one area of my home a recovery makeover, where would I start and why? You don't have to change everything. Just imagine starting with one space. What would it look like if that space said, "You're safe here"? How does my nervous system feel when I imagine using a meal zone? What parts respond? Do you feel calmer, more alert, resistant? Try to tune in. Let those responses surface. They're part of the conversation. This week isn't about creating the perfect setup. It's not about having the right label or the best reminder or the tidiest meal zone. It's about entering into relationship with your environment, making it work with you, not against you. Because when we do that, when we choose where, how, and when cues show up in our space, we're sending a powerful message to our system. You matter. You're not at the mercy of chaos. We're building something steady here. Every label you place, every reminder you create, every meal zone you set up, it's not just a practical action. It's a promise. A promise to your parts that we're doing this differently now. A promise that recovery isn't about control. It's about care. And we're doing it together. So keep going. You don't have to rush. Just one cue at a time. One breath at a time. Your environment is becoming an ally. And that changes everything.